David Weiss should resign. The Delaware U.S. attorney should never have been named special counsel for the Hunter Biden case. In a better world, there would be no special counsels. Though not as constitutionally pernicious as independent counsels, special counsels come with some of the same conceits, namely the idea they enjoy some magical independence from the president. But if a special counsel must be inflicted, David Weiss is uniquely unfit for the job. Mr. Weiss, the Delaware U.S. attorney, has been investigating Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings. While there have been calls for a special prosecutor for years, Attorney General Merrick Garland named Mr. Weiss special counsel only this month, shortly after Mr. Weiss was publicly humiliated in a federal courtroom by the implosion of the plea deal he reached with Hunter Biden. The deal collapsed because prosecutors were unable to defend it when the judge asked some basic questions. Race the dilemma, the plea deal is only the latest favor to Hunter. Arguably bigger was allowing the statute of limitations to lapse on offenses from 2014 and 2015, think Burisma. If Mr. Weiss now comes back and charges Hunter with more serious offenses, the obvious question will be, why was he willing to go along with a sweetheart plea deal in the first place? By the Justice Department's own measures, moreover, Mr. Weiss is a brazen pick. The special counsel, the rules state, shall be selected from outside the United States government. An outside prosecutor is needed because the whole grounds for a special counsel is that justice has a conflict of interest, in this case, prosecuting the son of the Attorney General's boss, the President. Mr. Weiss' own conflict is even more glaring. The real problem is the conflict Weiss has in investigating himself, says David Rivkin, a constitutional lawyer who has served in the Justice Department and White House counsel's office. He must investigate whether there was an earlier effort to obstruct the Hunter investigation, and he cannot do so because he was either involved in this obstructive activity or at least was a material witness to it. This includes questions about Weiss Deputy Leslie Wolf. 2 Internal Revenue Service agents testified how she undercut their investigation, once by tipping off Hunter's team about a storage locker they planned to search. The New York Times just reported, without irony, that Ms. Wolf enjoyed a rapport with Hunter's top defense lawyer. I'm sure she did. The Attorney General can waive the requirement that the special counsel come from outside the government, as Mr. Garland did here. But the choice of Mr. Weiss undermines rather than restores public confidence. Whenever he's been asked about powers he had or sought, Mr. Weiss has given carefully parsed statements that raise more questions than they answer. Count Andrew C. McCarthy among the skeptical. The former assistant U.S. attorney again points to Mr. Weiss' failure to indict Hunter on charges dating from when Joe Biden was vice president. The appointment, he says, is a joke, but makes sense if you think it's just the latest effort to make any substantive charges go away. Weiss has all along compliantly acted as the vehicle by which the Biden Justice Department protects the president, and thus the president's son, from a credible investigation, Mr. McCarthy writes in National Review. In the most charitable interpretation of the obstruction to which the whistleblowers testified, Mr. Weiss was a decent guy who tried to do his job but ran into political interference at every turn. But if Mr. Weiss believed his Justice Department superiors were making it impossible to do his job, the honorable response wasn't to stand aside and let them have their way. It was to resign, and explain publicly why he did so. It would still be his most honorable course. On Friday at Camp David, President Biden was asked for his reaction to the special counsel appointment. Right on cue he said, "I have no comment on any investigation that's going on." As many predicted, the special counsel gives Joe Biden cover to refuse to answer any questions. The Republicans who've been calling for a special counsel have themselves to blame. But holding Hunter criminally liable for his actions isn't the real challenge. It's bringing political accountability by letting the public know whether the Justice Department was tipping the scales for the president's son, and by exposing the full extent of Joe Biden's involvement as vice president with his son's business partners. Representative James Comer, notably, wasn't among the Republicans calling for a special counsel. Instead, he has used his oversight committee to force into the open material the Biden White House would prefer remain buried. A proper use of congressional powers, subpoenas, contempt resolutions, impeachment inquiry, is still the best path to the transparency necessary to restore public trust. No one should look to Mr. Weiss for a political resolution. But we still might get it from Congress, as frustrating and tedious as the oversight process can be. David Weiss should resign. The Delaware U.S. attorney should never have been named special counsel for the Hunter Biden case. In a better world, there would be no special counsels. Though not as constitutionally pernicious as independent counsels, special counsels come with some of the same conceits, namely the idea they enjoy some magical independence from the president. But if a special counsel must be inflicted, David Weiss is. DeSantis shrank in Ramaswamy's shadow. In a crowded debate, you can tell which candidates are seen as the greatest threat because they take the most incoming fire from their rivals. During the Republican presidential primary debate on Wednesday night, that person wasn't Ron DeSantis, who was once considered Donald Trump's greatest threat, but Vivek Ramaswamy, a 38-year-old political upstart with little chance of actually securing the nomination. Watching the DeSantis campaign collapse has been an extraordinarily edifying spectacle. There would have been no DeSantis without Trump. Trump endorsed DeSantis for governor of Florida when DeSantis was struggling against a strong Republican opponent for the party's nomination. DeSantis rode Trump's endorsement to victory. So, there was always something in the DeSantis campaign that knew that he was Macbeth coming to kill his king. The only problem was that DeSantis had ambition, but not the bloodlust. He lacks the courage, which is ironic given that DeSantis wrote a book before his run entitled, The Courage to be Free. Instead of making the case to voters that Trump was unfit, he is counting on Trump's martyrdom being his downfall. His gamble has yet to pay off. In addition, DeSantis has a chronic personality problem. He simply doesn't connect with people. He smiles the way a Doberman bares its teeth, it feels forced, aggressive and dangerous. You feel like you should retreat from it. And when he's not forcing a smile, he reflexively scowls. He has a resting wince face. He is not only emotionally aloof, but completely detached. He abides in aggression because the rest of the emotional range has either atrophied or failed to develop in the first place. In fact, during debate prep in 2018, one of his advisors told him that on the debate stage he would need to write "likable" in all caps at the top of his notepad. On Wednesday, DeSantis dispensed with that advice. He leaned into the aggression. But no one engaged. No one even responded. He was largely ignored by the other candidates, and the only thing that cuts deeper than disparagement is indifference. Instead, Ramaswamy was the target on stage, and he ate up the attention. Ever since the rise of Barack Obama and Republicans' unseemly reaction to it, the party has entertained exotica. In 2000